What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless Engineer, and I normally am responding to apologists, trying to give y'all the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. And today I have on Derreck Bennett, who's kind of been going around lately. You've been on a lot of shows. You're getting popular there, dude, and for good reason too. I think. The first time I heard about you was at the GCRR
Yeah,
conference, the
yeah,
online
GCRR.
conference.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
That was the first time I actually got I guess exposed to what you're doing and everything. First time I heard about you, and ever since then I've loved seeing everything that you've been putting out. So why don't you tell everybody kind of where to find you, what you do, how's the best way to support you, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yes, so hello, everyone. I'm Derreck Bennett. Welcome to my place here in a good old Paducah, Kentucky. Hope you won't hold that against me. I am, as I think Richard Carrier said it best, a quote unquote amateur scholar. So I don't have any advanced degrees, so to speak. I just have an undergrad in communications, but I've been studying comparative religion and just ancient Christianity and Judaism and various other ancient religions for about the past 17 years. So I've got a lot of I've got a lot of knowledge and whatnot under my belt. Um, and I have, of course, a YouTube channel that's a Theologica, where I dig into a lot of the stuff, comparative religion, counter apologetics, some fun response videos. And I'd say it's equal parts scholarship and equal parts atheistic comedy. So I like to employ a lot of humor and scholarship, and big into primary source texts and iconography from antiquity and what all that can tell us. And of course, I have a Patreon. So if you would be so kind as to support me on my Patreon, there's a short online book that's available there that you can download. It's called Exploring Origins: A Non-Believer's Guide to God and Religion. And then I've got these these presentations, these slideshow presentations that I do on like Myth Vision and Gnostic Informant and so forth. Those are also available for download on my Patreon. So join for as much or as little as is in your little heart to give. You'll have access to all of that, and you'll be supporting me, and I'd hugely appreciate it.
Definitely. And I just so that everybody knows that I am a Patreon supporter of Derreck here because of all the great work that he does in this particular area and all of the great information that he's provided, and just being another well of resource, for at least my edification. So I really appreciate that. Now I have Derreck's links in the description. So if you want to go and subscribe to Theologica, is that right? Theologica? Is that
A Theologica. Right? Yep.
A Theologica.
Theologica. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I've got that in the description, so you can just hit that up and subscribe real quick, or become a Patreon member if you like what you're going to hear today. And as far as today's topic, I just kind of wanted us to have sort of a casual discussion on common I guess myths surrounding Jesus around this time of year, because there's the good information that exists out there, and there's also bad information that exists out there, and I just kind of wanted to have sort of a casual discussion on that. And so I'm wondering where do you want to start with that?
Well, I mean, to start with, I was hoping for a very formal discussion, so I'm a little off put by your need for casuality, but whatever, we'll do it your way, bro. So yeah, we can get into, of course, I kid the guy. We can get into comparative religion and some of the bad stuff. Like when I first started cutting my teeth on this stuff years ago in my mid to late 20s. I was digging into Charia S's website, Truth Be Known, and reading, Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, and I was impressed by what I was finding, but never one to settle, for scratching the surface. I had to keep on digging, and it didn't take long before I found out that a lot of this stuff was bunk. Some of it might have been in the ballpark, but you got to provide the right data in support of whatever it is that you're saying. And so apologetics, believe it or not, was a place where I started digging pretty early on as well. James Patrick Holding's website, Tecton, or Tecton Ministries. The guy's a total jerk, but he was destroying zeitgeist, destroying it. And I had to reckon with that. I'd rather know the truth than settle for whatever sounds good to me. But I did eventually come across scholars like Robert M. Price and Richard Carrier, and then I kind of just branched out from there over the years. And I've taken in scholarship, academic work from a whole slew of scholars and different subsets and fields within the overall theme of ancient religion and philosophy. So that's, I guess, a good start. And we can get into, I guess, some of the bad stuff that you see, because I had to wade through a lot of garbage, through a lot of misinformation to get at the core of what was actually true, what was actually accurate. And it's really unfortunate that there is so much bad information out there. Like, why promulgate these bad parallels, these unsubstantiated parallels, when there are so many that are actually historically valid? Like, why waste anyone's time with that? Anyway, so as to, we can bring up Horus is mentioned a lot, the ancient Egyptian god Horus. You find that in Zeitgeist and in Bilamar's Religulus. It said that he had 12 disciples. We have no data supporting this, none that I'm aware of, that he was crucified. You see depictions of Horus in kind of a arms outstretched in sort of a cross kind of symbol. But that's to equivocate upon that and say he was crucified is absurd. Born of a virgin, no, not quite. His mother Isis basically recreated the phallus of her husband Osiris after he had been shred to pieces, and she resurrected him, and she used that phallus in order to conceive Horus, but she wasn't likely a virgin. I'm pretty sure she and Osiris were smashing it beforehand. So yeah, these just are not. And why Horus when his father Osiris is a far closer parallel to Jesus? Modern scholars like John Granger Cook, in his 2018 work, Empty Tomb, Resurrection, Apotheosis, says that the resurrection of Osiris is the closest analogy to that of the resurrection of Jesus. Osiris was a figure who had been essentially raised from the dead to become the judge of the dead in the afterworld. Your heart would be weighed on the scale, and whether it was too burdened with sin or whether it rose above that determined whether or not you would be permitted into Alru, or the Egyptian equivalent of heaven, basically. And it was because Osiris himself had been raised that other Egyptians hoped that they too could be raised from death to become immortal gods and spend their time with him in the afterlife. So, I mean, Osiris is, as S.G.F. Brandon once said, was phenomenologically, if not historically, a prototype of Christ. And that's from legitimate scholarship there. So, again, why the red herring with Horus? Look at his dad. Forget Horus. Look at Osiris. Um, Mithras, you'll hear that he was a dying and rising god who was born of a virgin. Well, he emerged fully grown from a rock, so rock, virgin, same diff, right? A miraculous conception, you could say, but certainly not a virgin birth. And there is no motif, no story of Mithras undergoing a death followed by a resurrection, though he does sacrifice a cosmic bull, and that has salvific implications in the Mithraic mysteries. So there certainly are some parallels between the mystery religion of Mithraism and that of Christianity, though they were concurrent developments, so to speak. So there's no need to think that either one was borrowing from the other. They're just cut from the same cloth, from the same thought world or mythic consciousness of the times. Um, let's see, Krishna. She was born of or he was born of a virgin, right? His mother was Devaki. Is that right? I think it's Devaki was the name of his mother, and I think Krishna was the eighth son to Devaki, so hardly a virgin. In fact, Devaki was more or less the octomom of antiquity. So those are just a few examples. Anything else that you want to toss out there, John?
Well, so on the topic of bad comparisons, which I have to say that I kind of got affected by the same sort of things that you got affected by, and weeding through all that bad information, like Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, where they had a whole bunch of like conspiracy laden stuff in there, and then I never saw Zeitgeist, but I definitely saw memes that resulted from that. And
Mhm.
so like really weeding out and figuring it out was kind of difficult, especially because I had never really uh been in that kind of environment of looking through these scholarly sources and everything like that. And I always try to find like either primary source material or at least some scholarly support for stuff that I say. So like one of the things that I find to be very prevalent, especially around this time of year, is this whole notion of like all of these dying and rising gods, or all of these figures that are supposedly parallels of Jesus or whatever, is that they're bored on December 25th. Like that's usually one of the things that is always in the list with all of these bad comparisons to other gods in antiquity. And um, I found that when I started looking into like the whole December 25th thing, and realizing that, well, Christmas or the birth of Jesus wasn't even important until to the Christians until way later. Like it makes no sense to even put that in the list. What do you think about the whole just like December 25th sort of celebration of not Christian, but Christ's birth and all that? What do you think about that as far as like the bad information that gets circulated?
Well, it's just blown completely out of proportion. What these bad sources say is that every single one of these gods was born on December 25th, and that's just not true. Now, it is the case with Horus, or Harpocrates, as he was known to the Greeks, that he was thought to have been born around the winter solstice. So, I mean, that gets you kind of close, right? It's probably no coincidence that they started celebrating Christ's birth, right around the winter solstice, whenever they were having these pagan solstice celebrations. And of course, Christian apologists are quick to point out that, well, they probably got that from its being 9 months following the Annunciation, in the springtime. And that's probably true as well. But even that is correlated with, Passover and some of these harvest type celebrations and festivals. It's no coincidence that Passover is celebrated then either. So naturally, this stuff does correlate with seasonal change and the solar cycles and whatnot. But to inflate that to the extent um, that all of these gods were born, specifically on December 25th is it's false. There's just no good data for that. I think the December 25th date, that may have been pre-Christian. I think Aurelian was celebrating something like that by 274 CE, and it officially became Christian by 336 CE, if I remember right. But that was pagan celebration of the birth of the god Sol. So that might be, the birth date of Sol on December 25th, the sun god. That might be valid there actually, but it's just unfortunately it's completely blown out of proportion and exaggerated.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where it starts to do the disservice is that when it starts getting blown out of proportion, exaggerated, then you have all this misinformation that gets thrown around and people latch on. It's really weird how people latch on to this bad information a lot harder than they do the good information, because the good information is not as, I guess, maybe spectacular as like having a list of like all these attributes and it's like, oh, Jesus is just another one of these guys. And I usually have to fight against that, a good bit, because while there are good comparisons to other like god figures in antiquity,
Many.
um yeah, it perplexes me as to why people would want to latch on to bad representations of it. And sorry, were you gonna say something?
Well, no, it's really honestly, John, it's the difference between laziness and being willing to really work hard and dig down to what's actually true, and you have to be motivated to do so. You have to care enough to do so. You have to be someone who's hungry for finding truth, and someone who is just naturally inquisitive enough to want to do so. But if you're lazy and you're not willing to, if you're not critical and you just accept whatever it is you hear, that's what you're bound to do. So, you know, you you whatever you put into something is what you get out of it. And hard work will result in good results.
I couldn't agree more with that. Now, um, and one of my on my list that I have here to try to drive our conversation today, I have like a section of good myths about Jesus, and you've got a really great video. It's a short video, but it's got a lot of great information in it on your channel, Theologica. Uh, that it talks about the virgin births in ancient antiquity, in antiquity, and I'm wondering if maybe you can kind of summarize your thoughts on that, because one of the big pushbacks is that like I guess it's combined, the virgin birth with the dying and rising God idea, that Jesus was just so different from the other ancient figures that it like he was his own unique thing in these respects. And I know that's like the bad part of the that whole section, but like there are other virgin birth like stories and ideas in antiquity, right?
There sure are. In most cases, what you have is a divinity or some kind of demigod who's half mortal and half god, precisely because his father is a high god and his mother is a mortal woman. So, I mean, that's a pretty close parallel right there. Now, in those cases, like I said, in most cases, it's because there was some kind of sexual interaction between the god and the mortal mother, which is not the case in Christianity. So it's not an exact parallel. It's not identical by any means, but it's a pretty close parallel. If you're not able to see that, wait a minute, it's still the case that he was conceived by a high god and a mortal woman. Does it have to be identical in order for you to be able to perceive that there is something similar going on here? That's in most cases. Now, we do have a few cases such as Aeschylus in the 5th century BC. So this is definitely pre-Christian. Talks about Zeus impregnating the mortal Io, and he does so merely by his breath or his touch. There's no actual intercourse involved here. So and Aeschylus, and I've since come to learn this, even since doing that video, just talking to other hobbyists like myself. Aeschylus goes on and on about how Io was unbedded and pure and whatnot. So she must actually have been a virgin, and she conceived by, like I said, the mere touch or breath of Zeus. And this is strikingly similar to the way in which Luke portrays Mary having conceived Jesus by the pneuma or spirit of God. So this is a very striking parallel. And then Plutarch. He's late 1st century, so roughly around the same time as the Gospels. Talks about the god Apollo having impregnated Perictione with Plato, with the philosopher Plato. Now, in antiquity, this was another one of those. Apollo had actually had intercourse with Perictione, but by the time of Plutarch, when they're beginning to allegorize this stuff more, or making it a little more spiritual or lofty, because they didn't much care anymore for the crude nature of these ancient myths. They're starting to allegorize or reinterpret these myths. So in Plutarch, it is merely the pneuma, the spirit of Zeus. He says it is not impossible for the spirit of a god to draw near and engender certain principles of generation. So yeah, that is, no sexual contact. Plato was simply conceived by Zeus and a mortal woman. So there are some very close parallels, and it's pretty clear that what we have in Christianity is just more of the same. It springs from that very thought world, or again, mythic consciousness that was prevalent during the Hellenistic age, from which Christianity emerged.
Yeah. So one of the pushbacks that I know occurs at this point generally in a conversation is that typically people are accused of saying that, well, Jesus was just a copy pasted Messiah or God figure or something like that. And I'm wondering, I see you sort of smiling about that. What are your thoughts on that kind of pushback against, drawing these parallels to other gods in antiquity?
Well, this is the straw man that you often hear. You encounter this with Christian apologists, where they use the word copycat or plagiarization, and it's such a rudimentary way, a crude way of describing it. I mean, are we in 3rd grade here? But of course, they have to construct these straw men so that it's easier to knock these positions down. I mean, that's kind of the sad position that they're in, and I don't pull any punches about that. I just say it. What like it is. But the truth is more. To give you an example, I mean, can you watch any kind of movie these days or listen to any kind of song where you're not able to detect similar tones or motifs or ideas that you find in other films or in other songs that you've heard before? Every piece of art, every human convention that is created, none of it is created in a vacuum. All of it is shaped and molded by previous ideas and by culture. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Of course, in Christianity, they're going to tell a story in which the great man or divine personage was conceived by a high god and a mortal woman, because that's just how business was done then. They're not copying this from any one story per se. These were just the kinds of ideas or motifs that were prevalent during that time. So it's something far more. It would have only been natural to tell the story that way. It was completely organic, completely natural. It wasn't a conspiracy. It wasn't anyone deliberately sitting down with the gospel of the pagans and plagiarizing things word for word. It's just as M. David Litwis says. It's the mythic consciousness of the times. It's stories that are shaped and molded by culture, by the emergence of something from a particular time and place in history.
Yeah. Thanks for laying that out. Sorry, I was collecting some comments real quick that maybe we can highlight. Like, we got Grimbeard here, who says, if there's no sexual interaction between Yahweh and Mary, what's the coming of the Lord?
I don't get it.
Giggity.
I don't get it. I'm just a yokel here in Kentucky. You gotta, you know what I mean? That you gotta take it easy on me with the jokes.
And then we got the Mythic Life, who's saying today is Saturnalia. Io Saturnalia. Is that low Saturnalia?
Lo Saturnalia.
There you go. So the pushback of, the whole copycat kind of deal always kind of gets me, because people don't understand like how syncretism works or anything like that, and it does end up grating on me a little bit, but it's whatever. But how, in your opinion, how likely is it that the birth of Jesus as told by the Gospels is like accurate? Like, what are your thoughts on like that particular aspect of it, since we're talking about virgin births and all this other stuff? Like, I guess minus the magicalness of the virgin birth idea, and I believe this is another video that you have on your channel. Everybody should go and definitely check out Derreck's channel, that's linked in the description, by the way. But I know that you've got a video where you talk about the nativity and how it's like purely legend. I'm wondering if you can kind of expand on that just a little bit.
To be honest, John, I don't know that I have covered the nativity per se. Really, just more focused on the whole notion of divine conceptions, wherein sometimes you do indeed have virgin births. But if the question is, do I think that any of this is historical? No, I don't. Like, and as you and I discussed, we're not really going to touch on mythicism versus historicity, because it's such a sensitive subject right now. I do, I'll lay it out there. I do lean toward historicity myself, but I don't hold a grudge toward anyone who doesn't. Like, I don't have a horse in that race. I prefer to just love everyone and get along with everyone. It's let 100 flowers bloom. Why not? It's not like you're going to offend me by saying Jesus didn't. I'm not going to get rattled by it.
Right.
I happen to think there was a historical Jesus, but I don't give a damn about him. So I just don't
right. Well,
care.
and just to preface, like, I'm coming at all of my questions even on the assumption of a historical Jesus, because in my view, like, whether or not there was a historical Jesus, the birth of Jesus and all of that didn't become important until much later. So that's definitely a legendary development of like the importance of the birth of Jesus. But I guess I was trying to think of stuff around this time of year that's normally put out there, like what coming home today from us going and getting lunch, there was somebody's front yard that says "Happy Birthday, Jesus." and they've got like little presents out front, and so I always laugh at that because obviously that's more of a Christian idea, but I remember I'm trying to pull up your channel right now without screwing everything else up, but I thought that I remembered you putting out a video kind of about that, but
Well,
yeah,
I'll just tell you,
I'm totally coming at this from a perspective of, let's just assume there was a historical person.
right, okay. Yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying is I do not put a whole lot of stock in the Gospels. I really don't. When I say that, I lean toward historicity, I'm talking very minimal historicity. In other words, I think there probably was a guy, but I just don't think that we can know much more than the broadest outlines about him. That he was probably an apocalyptic prophet who may well have even had zealous tendencies. There's no reason why those two couldn't coexist. But these portraits that we get of him in these gospel narratives, I think people like Robin Faith Walsh and Dennis R. MacDonald are on point when they talk about how these authors who are anonymous are clearly educated cultural elites who are certainly familiar. I mean, they had to have been educated in Greek literary tropes and writing and the whole nine yards. They've probably read Herodotus and Livy and Ovid and so forth, and they are crafting these. They're crafting these basically these Hellenistic prose novels in order to tell this legendary story about someone who, by their time, they nigh well might not have known much of anything about. Which, go figure, that's why we don't find this stuff in Paul. We find it decades later in these narratives. So I think that the nativity, I mean, even that has resonances with the story of Moses and his birth. You find this kind of stuff in the tale of Romulus, and I think it's Sargon the Akkad as well. It's like Philip Davies said, Philip Davies in his great article that I think mythicists and historicists alike can appreciate, where he says, look, I'm coming down on on the side of saying there probably was a guy, but it's not crazy, it's not idiotic to suggest mythicism. It's a topic, it's an issue that's worth exploring, and to do the whole argumentum ad Bartum, thus saith Bart. I'm Bart Ehrman, I said it, you believe it, that settles it. No, it's not a crazy endeavor. It's worthwhile to explore that topic because let's face it, this guy just reeks of legendary material. I mean, he does rank highly on is it the Lord Raglan, the rank Raglan scale. But then we know other historical figures like Augustus do as well, and Apollonius as well. So, but at any rate, it does justifiably allow someone to ask the question: is like, are we even dealing with a historical person at all? And so, long story short, the Gospels are just they're creative literary works that are telling a story that partakes of all of the kind of literary tropes and mechanisms that were prevalent at that time. If there is much of historical value in there, well, let me put it this way: there may be some historical value, but not very much. I think it is primarily legendary and literary.
Do you think that there are any good methods out there for distinguishing between historical fact and fiction in like the gospel texts?
You know, there might be. Um, the problem that I have, like, so I mean, you'll listen to Bart Ehrman talk about how we have these methods that we've established for kind of peeling away the sort of mythic and legendary layers and getting to the root of what there is actually historical and what is likely to have been something that Jesus himself actually said. And the way I see it, I think there's far too much confidence placed in these methods. I mean, it's still a subjective matter of extrapolating uh, whatever you think you can based on these completely artificial tools. And I just I gotta say, John, I basically reside comfortably um, in this position that's probably right in the middle of where a lot of historicists are and where a lot of mythicists are. Um, I don't think that we can, you know, any kind of, it's like Albert Schweitzer said a long time ago, whatever portrait of Jesus you come up with and using these methods is very likely going to be a portrait that you yourself conceived because it was something that you were trying to arrive at to begin with. Um, so yeah, I just, you know, if I were to learn, I'm not terrible. I'm not an expert by any means on those methods. Maybe if I were to learn more about it, I'd understand a little bit more what they're getting at. But I do think they have an inflated sense of how well that stuff actually works.
Okay. Now, uh, the next topic I have in mind is a little bit off of where we were, but before we move off of that, I just want to ask you: was there anything that we didn't cover that you kind of thought about that maybe something that kind of irks you about bad information that gets circulated, like about Jesus and all that kind of stuff?
Um, No, I think that pretty well covers the bad info. I have a fun blog out there. It's not on my YouTube or on Patreon, but I used to host a website called Atheomedy. It's like kind of a combination, a syncretism of atheism and comedy. And I have
Mhm.
a blog on there that's years and years old now, and uh, it could stand to get a good revision because there were things then I didn't know that I know now. But it's called Five Pagan Parallels to Jesus that actually aren't bullshit, and that's a fun one worth reading because I delve right into that, which is zeitgeist and what's bad about it, but what you can actually find in terms of what's historically valid based on actual academic work and primary source texts.
I'm kind of curious that since you brought up the whole parallels and everything like that, I'm thinking about the common pushback of, well, that's just parallelomia or crap,
Parallelomania.
mania.
Yeah. Hey,
Mania.
interesting fact about that. The man who coined the term parallelomania. We're but good. You're rubbing off on me, John. Damn it.
I'm fucking you up. I'm sorry.
Fucking me up. I forgot we can cuss on this show because I'm a pirate.
Yeah.
Man, oh man, you follow me on Facebook. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Hey, feel free if you're watching this to follow me on social media on Facebook because I'm a fun kid. I'm a fun guy. I'm worth checking out. Um, where
I
was I?
can
Where was I with this?
definitely attest to that because I have a lot of fun, responding to your posts. So yeah, I definitely suggest that.
But I got sidetracked there. What were we talking about? I'm old as the day is long.
Parallelomania.
Parallelomania. Yeah. So the man who coined the term parallelomania was Rabbi Samuel Sandmal. He was a Jewish scholar who was he didn't hate Christianity, as a result of his being Jewish. He very objectively studied the New Testament and gave his own take on it. in a great work called A Jewish Understanding of the New Testament. It's a great book. And so, granted, he understood that people could go too far afield with these parallels. He nonetheless did say that that Christianity is strikingly similar to these ancient mystery religions, and that if you don't understand that, there's a whole lot you're missing here. Like if to not see that is to really be missing a big piece of the picture. And I think Bart Ehrman is one of those who is missing that. He says that they were mysteries, they were secrets, therefore we can't know anything about them. Well, we wish we knew more, because of that. But there's actually quite a bit that we can know and that we can extrapolate from the data, and that's precisely what I and other scholars do. Um, but I mean, yeah, when it comes to Parallelomania, that pretty well. That's a legitimate way of labeling much of what we find in stuff like Zeitgeist and Religulous and the Da Vinci Code and whatnot. But there are too many legitimate scholars out there, like M. David Litwa, Richard Carrier, Richard Miller, Robert Price, Dag Osteen Enzo. I mean, I could go on and on with the number of scholars who are doing real academic, recent, modern scholarship that says, yes, absolutely, we do find in Christianity a lot of motifs that were quite prevalent during that day and age. It is, as Philip Davies said in his article, "Did Jesus Exist?" The portrait of Jesus that we have in the New Testament is composed of stock motifs found from all over the Mediterranean world. So, if apologists just want to punch down and strike at the low-lying fruit of Zeitgeist and have a field day with that and pretend that they're somehow victorious as a result, so be it. But they're not dealing with more rigorous scholarship that's out there.
Yeah, Dennis McDonald, he's actually got a really good book called Two Shipwrecked Gospels, and he shows the connections between Homer's works and the Gospels. And so he's got a lot of great information there. What would be your suggestion on determining or distinguishing between a good set of parallel descriptions of parallels and this parallelomania kind of situation where people are just picking out I guess anything that could be a parallel, but they're either coincidental or they're not all that important?
Well, two things, and both of them in tandem. That is, find reputable scholarship, stuff that is produced by people with real deal scholarly or academic degrees, people with PhDs. Although you do here and there, you'll find someone like me who does not have a PhD, but has just spent years studying this stuff. Although what I'm careful to do is to cite. I cite these scholars who are working in this field, so you can pretty well trust my work because I'm giving you the gravy from the people who really do matter. So, reputable scholars, actual credentialed scholars, and primary sources. Primary sources. Even if I read something in someone who is a credentialed scholar, John, I want to know where they themselves are getting that information. So I want to find, so I will peruse the footnotes and find the sources to which they are appealing, and then I will. You can find this stuff online, guys. It's these ancient works written by these authors from millennia ago. You can find these reproduced, these texts translated in English online. And so I will go to the source and read it for myself and make sure that whatever they're conveying is accurate. So yeah, focus on reputable scholarship and primary source texts, and frankly, the two of those together in tandem, and you'll be able to find some good stuff that way.
Yeah, and I guess which the direction that I was gonna kind of lead us in is like being able, like what would be your suggestion for wading through all of the bad information that surrounds the topic of religions and ancient history, but I kind of guess that that would probably be the same advice. There would be
Yeah,
good scholarship and
avoid
primary
anything
sources.
that's not what I just described.
Well,
Avoid it like
and
the plague.
right, and one thing that I've noticed that usually sets off my bells is when I'm reading something and somebody presents something without either previous scholarship or primary sources, and then it's like primarily speculation about stuff. Is that something similar to, like, I don't know if you have like alarm bells that go off whenever you're reading something and then people are just saying stuff and speculating about things without actually like providing those kinds of evidence. Like, is that something that goes off for you, or do you have like a different I guess alarm system?
Definitely, like if it almost sounds too good to be true, that's definitely going to ring some bells. And if someone just asserts something without providing any kind of credible citation, I mean, the first thing I'm going to do is ask them, "Great, what's your source?"
Mhm.
But when you've been doing this as long as I have, you can almost tell automatically whether someone is credible or not, and that's something that just kind of has to be. You have to hone that over time. So, to anyone who's watching this who wants to get their feet wet, again, just stick to the method that I have thus described, which is reputable, credentialed scholars, primary source texts. That's what you want, and there are great resources online as well. Um, if you don't have a whole lot of money to be able to afford a lot of books, there are sources like academia.edu. That is a fantastic source. Great for digging up these academic articles that don't take that long to read, where you can get just a wealth of information just from one article. Um, Read everything that you can get your hands on in this field, because there are so many different scholars with so many different perspectives and approaches, um, to where you can more or less develop your own synthesis or point of view based on all that you have read and distilled in your own work and in your own introspection, and weaving together of all these great sources. Um, Academia.edu is great. You can get a subscription to Scribd, although if you do what I do, I subscribe to Scribd, and when it comes time for it to expire, I cancel it, and they say, "Hey, you want to renew?" And I'm like, "Well, sure, I want to renew," and they give me another 30 days. So, um, maybe not the most ethical thing in the world, but I mean, hey, if they let you do it, I'm going to do it. Um, what else? The JSTOR is another great online resource for uh, gathering academic works, reading academic publications and articles. I mean, there's guys, there is an abundance of resources out there. A lot of this that you can find online nowadays. That so long as you're careful to determine that it is an actual academic source, something attributed to an academic um, organization or university, then you can count on that being a pretty solid resource.
Do you ever use Sci-Hub?
I haven't heard of that one. No.
Well, I think right now the link is sci-hub.se, which that's what I usually use. If you can, like, if you go to JSTOR or any of the, if you find an article that's kind of like that, it's a little difficult to get your hands on. If you get the DOI number, you can go to sci-hub.se and you can put the DOI number in there, and if they have it in their collection, they'll fetch it for you by DOI number. And so
That's cool.
I've when I've doing when I've double checked on like citations and sources and stuff, I often will go to Sci-Hub first to see if I can get access to it. And like if it's pretty recent scholarship that you need to pay in order to like get access to it, they generally don't have it. But for like older articles that are out there, journal articles or papers or anything like that, they'll usually have it accessible through there. But that's a really great place to check for sources and everything. And I mean, I have to say I've done the exact same things that you've talked about here. I've always kind of went back to the primary sources. Like I've read Plutarch's description. I forget what the name of it is, of the Isis and Osiris cult. And talking about how that's kind of structured, and because I wanted to verify for myself about the dying and rising nature of Osiris, which I know that you've done a lot of work on. The connections between Egypt and its effects on like the Bible that we have now, or the theology of Christianity. Um, so so yeah, I definitely think that everything that you said, I totally think is a good route to go, because that's the route that I usually go as well. But it's also nice to know that I've got no formal training in this particular area either. I mean, I've got a master's in software engineering, but that doesn't really qualify me for anything that we're talking about here. But it's nice to know, to hear from outside of myself, that like this is a very good way of being able to suss out good information from bad information.
Absolutely. And guys, you'll be able to tell whether or not you're reading a legitimate scholar, because if you're reading a legitimate scholar, they themselves are going to be citing other scholars, and they're going to be citing ancient works and primary source texts. If you're not seeing that technical data within the body of the work, then you need to be questioning it. Now, every now and then, you'll come across something by a scholar that's written for a lay audience where maybe you don't see a whole lot of that stuff. But if you've been in the game long enough, you might know who this person is, and that whether or not there's someone that's trustworthy. If nothing else, just check, Google them, and see what their credentials are. But you do get to a place where you can more or less, all the telltale signs are there, concerning whether you're reading someone who is legit or not.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Well, Derek, I really appreciate you coming by and talking about everything with us today. Now, I know that you do. Is that is all of this kind of primarily what you do over there on Theologica, or do you do other stuff over there as well?
On a Theologica, it almost always falls into one of three categories, and so my playlists are set up just that way. It's going to be counter apologetics, which is debunking a lot of this silliness that we hear from Christian apologists, or comparative religion, where I am discussing the striking similarities between Christianity and other uh, you know non-Jewish religions of the time. And I've got just two videos on this, but sobriety without God. I am a recovering alcoholic and addict, been sober for 4 years now, and contrary to what you so often hear in conventional recovery, like Alcoholics Anonymous and so forth, you don't need God to recover or get sober. You don't need it, because I'm doing it, and I'm not a dry drunk either. You know, they say if you're doing it without God, then you're just white knuckling and angry and dry. So angry, hawking out here, buddy, just hawking out. So those are basically the categories. You're going to find one of those three, and a lot of these, you know, if the comparative religion and counter apologetics can sometimes go hand in hand as well, because you can use that to show that, like for instance, appealing to a missing body, like the empty tomb, or to appearances, to witnesses, and so forth. Guys, this is common in antiquity. These are common literary tropes. Anytime a body went missing, the body of a great man or king or hero, it always signified that they had been taken up and deified and made immortal. It's the same kind of thing that's going on in the Gospels. Post-mortem or post-mortal appearances to witnesses. You find this all over the ancient world in tales of Romulus, Aristeus, Asclepius, Hercules, and many others. I mean, it's just, that was how business was done back then. These are common mythic, legendary, literary tropes, and it's no surprise that we find them in the New Testament and in the Gospels. This isn't hard historical data that's providing you evidence that there's anything historically true about Jesus here. It's just not. Yeah, you'll find all of that and then some on Theologica, and hey, if you can support me on Patreon so that I can really put the pedal to the metal and do this stuff full time, really crank out a lot of content, man, oh man, I'd appreciate it.
Definitely. And like I said before, I became a patron of Derreck recently because of all the great stuff that he's put out. And so, if y'all feel so inclined, definitely consider supporting him over there. But also go and subscribe to Theologica. I gotta try to get the pronunciation of it in my head, because I mean, I'm from the South. I'm lucky that I'm able to talk coherently with as long as I've been in North Alabama. But anyways, we do have a couple of super chats to kind of address. So I really appreciate those that have done super chats. If you guys don't know, here on the channel, any of the revenue that we get, we donate a portion of that to a charity each month. And this month, we're donating to RAIN, and that's the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. So if you want to help us do that, just keep watching our videos or become a member or whatever, or send super chats. But we've got, first up is Vesper, who says, how do you respond to those saying the previous and subsequent religions to Christianity are counterfeits of Satan based on Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz?
Holy cow. Well, I know that there are some wild conspiracy theories out there concerning Nimrod and tying him to Osiris. I don't recall a whole lot about it, but I know that stuff is out there. So look, what I can tell you is, first of all, it's already pretty desperate to begin with. When you're having to appeal to the idea that Satan counterfeited this stuff in advance. I mean, that's on par with saying that Satan placed fossils under the earth in order to trick us and test our faith concerning dinosaurs. It's just ridiculous on its face. And naturally, it's just it's a variant of the special pleading argument, wherein you're saying that all of these other tales are myths. All of this stuff that was popular in the ancient Mediterranean world, that's all legend, that's all mythology, but the similar such stories we find in Christianity, that's all true. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a total double standard. It's special pleading again on its face. The other problem with that is Satan is not real. Let's just let's just lay our cards out, okay? Satan does not exist. Satan is a composite figure who is woven together from early in the Hebrew Bible, such as in Job. He is essentially God's right hand man. He's doing God's dirty work. He is one of these sons of God and God's heavenly prosecutors, sniffing out people like Job to test them for whether or not they're truly faithful to the Almighty. He's the adversary of man, but not of God. He's working for God. It's only later, much later in Judaism and then in Christianity, that he becomes the embodiment of pure evil, such that he's the adversary of both man and God. And that's very likely due to the influence of Zoroastrianism after the Jews had been freed from Persian Zoroastrianism, from Persian Zoroastrians in the 6th century BC, freed from their captivity in Babylon. The influence of the evil god Ahriman, who was the adversary of the wise lord Ahura Mazda. So, yeah, Satan himself is just a composite, fictive character, and they aren't terribly good at counterfeiting legends in advance because they don't exist. They're not real. So that's just nonsense.
Now, I want to say, and maybe you have a better memory. You probably have a better memory than I, but I believe it was I know it was an early church father, maybe Irenaeus or maybe somebody else that noticed the parallels between, the Jesus of the Gospels and other ancient gods, and actually did the first, well, Satan came before and planned all this stuff out in order to discredit the real coming of Jesus. And I can't remember which church father that was, but I know that was a pretty early apologetic for that.
Multiple church fathers did this. Justin Martyr was doing it as early as the 2nd century CE in his dialogue with Trypho and in the First Apology. One or the other, or both. Firmicus Maternus was doing this when he was griping about the Osiris cult in 4th century Rome. I think you're right that Irenaeus did it as well, and there are probably others. Tertullian also. Tertullian did this when he noticed the Mithraic meal and some of the similarities that were going on in Mithraism. So multiple church fathers were noticing this and pinning it on the devil.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that Justin Martyr was actually the one that I was thinking of, but I mean, like you said, I think it was probably like Irenaeus that also did it, but my memory's spotty right now. Next, we've got the Mythic Life.
Oh God, no! This Kristen Whitaker Hood again.
Yes,
this woman.
I like to imagine my Jesus frolicking with Lazarus in a montage dubbed with the Queen's "You're My Best Friend."
Kristen Whitaker Hood, we're trying to be serious here. You're ruining the show. She does this every time, John. Good Lord, that woman. She knows how much I hate her.
Yeah. I don't know. I have it on good authority that that's not true.
Yeah, she's a blast. She's a blast.
Yeah, she is. This one's not a super chat, but I thought it was an interesting thing to point out here. Jacques said, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name there, Jacques. Sorry about that. But it says, Derreck Bennett is well-grounded and quite articulate, my favorite kind of scholar. And I think that you are very articulate and very well thought out. And that's why I decided to have you here on my show.
And I'm very happy to be here, by the way. I hadn't said it yet, so I wanted to say it.
Oh.
So there it is. I'm happy.
Yeah. Casey said, "Well, he has a communications degree, so obviously." And then finally, super chat Zachary Lahaki says, "Discussing facts about Jesus's birth can be fun, but let's face it, the best parts of Christmas have nothing to do with manger sets. Thanks for coming on, Derek, and Merry Atheist Christmas, everyone." Yes.
I second that. Hey, this atheist loves Christmas. I love it. I love the season. I love the festivity. I love the warmth, the lights, everything about it. It's one of those things from my childhood that I retain and keep near and dear to me in my heart. I'm a Christmas loving atheist if ever there was one, by golly.
Yeah, me too. But I mean, I'm right here with Zach that a lot of this is secularized now. So I mean, I actually had somebody from a local paper here in North Alabama contact me because they had found out that I was an atheist, and they were like, "Can you tell us like why you celebrate Christmas still? Like, what the fuck's up with that?" And so that was an
Because
interesting
it's great.
conversation I had. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, Derek, that's going to be it for the super chats and everything like that. I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your thoughts about all this bad information that commonly goes around in general, not just this time of year, but this time of year, common memes come up. So I really appreciate you coming on, kind of discuss that topic. And I hope that everybody goes and subscribes to Derek over there on Theologica. I got that in the description. I also updated it with your Facebook profile since you told everybody that they can go and follow you over there. I wasn't going to out you on Facebook there, but since you told everybody about it,
Oh, I'm all for outing myself. It's cool.
Oh yeah. Okay. But again, thank you for coming on. Everybody go check out Derek, all of his videos. They're great. Like I said, I've checked out a lot of his videos, and they're all superb in information and the way that he's put them together. So definitely go check out Derek over there. And any final words there, Derek, for the stream?
No final words. Just I second John. Get on that Theologica. Hit that subscribe button. Support me on Patreon if you can, and follow me on old Facebook. John, it's been a lot of fun. Sincerely, has been being here with you, and let's definitely do this again.
Oh, yes, you are definitely on my short list for having back on. So I'll see everybody later. Next week, we've got some great stuff coming out, and I guess we will see you heathens. Oh, wait, we got a last minute super chat. Johnny Rapine saying, "Thanks for getting me through the last hour." So here it is, just in case you wanted to see it. Yeah, you're welcome there, Johnny. Glad that you could catch us live there. Anyways, we'll see y'all heathens later. Don't forget to stand up, use your voice, and all that kind of good shit. And we will see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.